everybody, and welcome to this week's weekly Intelligence Insights brief. I'm Ross Hill, Director of Intelligence for At Risk International's Global Risk Intelligence team. And the first thing we are going to talk about today are the objects being shot down in US airspace. US has now shot down 4 objects in the past 9 days. The first one on February the 4th was the suspected Chinese surveillance balloon. Then we had an object shot down over Alaska on February 10th. That's described as having no identified propulsion or control system. The February 11th one over Canada, described as a cylindrical object. And then the February 12th one over Lake Yukon as an octagonal object. Full details of what they actually are have not been released. We don't know if they are civilian, military, or one of the other sort of more outlandish theories going around that they're extraterrestrial in nature, but the debris is being collected for analysis. They are deliberately being referred to as objects because at the moment it's unsure if they are balloons similar to the original Chinese one, but China is denying any knowledge of the latest ones. But it does appear that the US military has adjusted how it identifies objects in its airspace, and that's probably what's caused the short-term increase in the frequency of things being detected. So we need to see how kind of that plays out after we see what these latest objects are. In terms of implications, after the first incident, the US did introduce some trade restrictions on 6 Chinese entities linked to China's aerospace program. But we won't really know the implications from the latest incidents until we understand what the objects really are. I suppose one interesting thing is the height they've been detected at, and then the operations to shoot them down, of course, some short-term closures to airspace. So we might see some more of that in the near term. And then additionally, the shooting down of the objects is setting a precedent for what other governments might do in a similar situation. We're already seeing reports that China might prepare to shoot something down in its airspace. But anytime you start to see the frequency of this type of thing increase, then the margin for miscalculation actually increases. And not every government might do it in what you might consider the most responsible way, similar to how the US has done it, making sure it's shooting down objects over unpopulated areas, sending flights up to do a visual check on what they actually are. And I guess in some ways you can sort of compare it to the reports we see of Chinese pilots in particular flying dangerously close to sort of US, Australian and other aircraft, where it's just that margin for miscalculation increases. Our next one around an increase in journalist deaths. So according to the UNESCO Observatory of Killed Journalists, 86 journalists and media workers were killed globally last year. That is significantly above the yearly average from 2019 to 2021, which was 58. We did see a number of journalists killed in conflict zones, primarily related to the war in Ukraine. That's actually not the main reason for the increase in deaths. And most deaths actually occurred in countries not affected by war in the sort of Russia-Ukraine sense. Over half the deaths in 2022 are in Latin America and the Caribbean, particularly Mexico and Haiti, which we know are affected significantly by gang activity or organised crime activity. I think another interesting thing from the report was about half the journalists killed were at home or in public places when it happened, rather than actually on assignment or reporting somewhere. So highlighting the risk of direct targeting of journalists as reprisals for reporting on sensitive subjects, organised crime, corruption, those kinds of things. And then lastly, we've had the announcement of record profits by oil and gas companies, particularly BP, Shell and Exxon. That's been met with a significant level of negative sentiment. This is because of the link between energy prices and inflation, and that's fueling the perception that the sector is sort of profiteering from the current geopolitical situations that's caused the high prices. Obviously, the oil and gas sector is no stranger to activism, particularly from environmental and climate campaigners. But now we might expect to see further activism triggered by concerns over cost of living. And that's going to be the same for any sector that's perceived as profiting from the current situation. Generally, most of the protests we see are peaceful. It's likely to continue to be that way. But there is that increasing level of resentment towards the oil and gas sector, particularly, and an increasing sense that peaceful protests are not achieving the desired results. And that does increase the likelihood of some more sort of extreme activity. You'll see on the slide there a couple of comments pulled from social media that peaceful protests are basically not enough. And that people might want to consider targeting the homes of executives of oil companies. And that was from just a very rudimentary search. There's likely more similar content out there. That's it from us this week. We hope you found the information interesting and insightful, and we'll see you again soon.